It is your Classic Metal Show right here on the ClassicMetalShow.com. That is Volbeat right there with still counting all the assholes in the room. And Chris, another asshole just entered the room. Your friend, Josh Toomey. Welcome to the Classic Metal Show there, Josh.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's a pleasure to be on.
Wow, you don't have to be so formal. Say, fuck yeah, I'm on the Classic Metal Show, dude.
Fuck all y'all.
There you go. Excellent. Well, Josh, I got to be honest with you. I am not as familiar with you as Chris, because Chris is the blabbermouth of the show. And hopefully we don't get sued by Blabbermouth for using that trademark. But anyway, I'm going to let Chris take over, and I'll interject as things go along. So take it away, Chris.
All right. Well, this is easy enough. I mean, the reason that I'm having Josh on the show is because not just because I appeared on his podcast, but more because I'm a fan of it. For those that don't know, the Talk to Me podcast has been around a little while now, up to roughly 80 or 90 episodes of the podcast at this point, and it's a lot of interviews and a lot of cool shit, and it's more, to me, it's a lot more pro than most of the bullshit that calls itself a podcast these days. So, Josh, why don't we start with, little setup, little history about, your decision to get into podcasting and, your history leading up to that.
Well, thank you so much for the kind words. That's a huge honor coming from you guys, all those nice things you say about the podcast. But what kind of got me into the podcast world is just growing up, I was a huge fan of music. Huge fan of metal, huge fan of just going out and going to concerts and meeting bands and talking to bands. And, I would hang out by the tour buses for hours on end, hoping to get 5 minutes with, Dimebag Darrell, or 5 minutes with Bobby Blitz of Overkill, and, just hanging out as much as I could. And then, when I'd get those few minutes, I'd want to ask as many questions as possible. So, and then that just kind of morphed into, I actually started playing music, and then I would be in situations where I would be on tour with a guy that might have played in Stuck Mojo or something, and so I would sit there and talk to him and pick his brain, like, in the long bus rides. And, after my quote-unquote musical career, really kind of took a few years off and laid low, but then I really got into podcasts, and I sat and thought about it, and I was like, you know what? I know so many people in the music business. I can probably get a few episodes under my belt, just making a few phone calls, asking a few favors. And, I've grown to love this medium, and, just sitting back talking to people and picking their brains. And a lot of times it's not I don't write out my questions. I don't have formal, yes or no questions or anything like that with my guests. I just, I ask the questions that I want to know. And over this time, I think a lot of people have come on board, and, my numbers are great. And, Blabbermouth, like you guys were talking about earlier, they pick up the podcast all the time. So I've made a lot of headlines with it.
Sure. Now, it's one thing there's a lot of musicians or former musicians or retired musicians or whatever you want to call that try this, and it peters out pretty fast. There's a few that get it. And and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the reason I think most don't get it is because they assume that because they were in the business that it's just going to be this easy run. And then really you kind of find out once you start doing it that nobody really gives a shit what you did before. True, not true, what?
I think it, like I said, it kind of got my foot in the door. And so, yeah, I don't think people really care about what I did. And a lot of times if I sit down with the artist one-on-one, I might say at the end of it, hey, do you remember this band, Primer 55? Yeah, I played bass for them. And, sometimes they remember, sometimes they don't. And it turns out to be a cool thing, but I'm at the point now where, it's not people coming to the podcast to hear stories of me on the road. It's because I'm having really cool guests on.
Sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about your time on the road. You, as you just said, you were in Primer 55, which, as I said at the beginning of the show tonight, arguably there's two bands in my world that I've met firsthand and, you know, seen several times and experienced that just came off as monumentally dysfunctional or fucked up. Primer 55 was one of them, and American Head Charge was the other one. So, you know, from what I know of you, you seem like you're pretty much together. So I'm assuming that you kind of observed a lot of the fucked upness that was going on. So talk a little bit about that band. Was it as fucked up as it seemed to, you know, to the outside guy that just strolled backstage for an interview and just saw chaos, or was that just something that I just happened to see a few times?
No, I'm pretty sure that you saw exactly what was going on. That was probably the most dysfunctional band out there. And the type of person that I am, once I got into the band, I feel like I kind of calmed the waters a little bit. But at the same time, I was a little too late in the party to really do any damage to what they already wrecked. But yeah, when I first joined the band, I joined in 2002, right after the second album was released. And we had about a 2-month tour with Dope coming up. And, you know, their bass player just kind of quit on them. I had auditioned for Primer prior to the second album. I didn't get it, kind of came down to the final two. Maybe I was a runner-up or whatnot. But then I talked to Bobby about doing some other stuff. Bobby Burns, who went on to Soulfly. We talked about doing another band together. And he kind of emailed me out of the blue and like, hey, you know, do you want to come join Primer? And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. You know, I'd love to. And I was living in Nashville. The band was based out of Louisville. You know, I drove up here to Louisville, where I live now, to rehearse for the tour. And we go into the rehearsal, and we made it about a song and a half. And they were just like, fuck it, let's just load the band and go. Like, we were like, I was like, Jesus Christ, you know, we didn't even make it through a song and a half, and we were on to Brooklyn, where the first show of the tour was at L'Amour's. And so I'm just, you know, I had done regional touring, you know, out of a you know, successful local band out of Tennessee, but nothing national like this. So I'm basically thrown on stage at the L'Amour's in Brooklyn with Primer 55 in front of, like, you know, Julia from Fuse was there, and like looking into it, I think Rob Caggiano was there, like all these like just major people at this amazing club, you know, historical club in New York. And I'm just up there like an idiot because, you know, we had no tour rehearsals, and it was exactly what you described.
Nice. Well, Josh, getting back to your whole podcast thing, Chris and I have been doing, you know, anywhere from broadcast radio on commercial radio outlets to obviously doing what we do here on the Classic Metal Show. And between Chris and I, we've built up this show in the Classic Metal Show network together for the last probably about the last 12 years. And, you know, we're highly successful in what we do. We don't understand what makes our success because what we do we think is just silly. But getting into your podcasting and your focus and, you know, when you decided to do this, what was your first inkling into saying, you know what, I think I want to do a podcast and I want to do this? What was your vision when you decided you're going to jump into the podcasting foray?
Just listening to so many podcasts, you know, like I talked with Chris when he was on my show. You know, my day job now is I deliver the mail, so I listen to podcasts. I listen to you guys, listen to Josh's show, listen to even stuff like the Nerdist, Joe Rogan and Bill Burr, and Off Our Meds podcast, Decibel Geek, all those guys. You know, just listening to podcasts all day at work, you have to, you know, after a while I was like, you know what, I can really do this, and I really think I can do this. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with having some connections in the music business. I was able to the first few episodes, call some favors in and kind of do some test runs and just, you know, because even though I was in music for so long, like the actual recording side of music was never my forte. Like I was more of a live person. So it's not like I just had mics laying around the house and all this stuff. So I just kind of dusted off the old computer, downloaded some software, got a really crappy mic. You know, my first few episodes are hit or miss, but, you know, it was just kind of, I really wanted to do an interview type show and talk to my friends at first, and then I've ended up, you know, talking to my heroes So that was kind of the vision of the show. Obviously, it's me. Book the guests, produce the show, top to bottom, promote the show. Everything's all on me. So it's kind of a, evolving show from what it started out to be. But, I think I'm starting to, it's so crazy to say 80 episodes in and, starting to hit that groove. But I'm really thinking I'm putting together a really good product. And from everyone, to the subscribers, to the people that rate it on iTunes, to people that reach out, email, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff, I'm getting a lot of great feedback. So people seem to like it. And I kind of go back with what you guys say about, you don't know how you guys got so successful or how people are so into the show. And I'm kind of the same way. I'm like, I can't believe so many people enjoy the show. I'm always so skeptical about it.
Sure, absolutely. Now, one of the critical points of doing what Chris and I do, I'm a huge stickler on audio sound, and being that you're a musician, yourself, and you understand presentation and making sure your audio is good. What are you using for your recording? You got any special mics or just the run of the mill off the shelf stuff? Any mixing boards? Did you consciously have an idea in your head? Man, this podcast needs to sound this way to make it listenable, because Chris and I made I'm gonna use a term here that doesn't really apply, but the best one that I can think of. Chris and I made a living on the show critiquing other podcasts for quite a while, and there was a lot of shitty podcasts out there, audio, poor audio and poor content wise. What sets you apart with your audio and your content from anybody else out there?
I just want to make a show that I want to listen to, and I don't have a huge, when it comes to audio, when it comes to gear, I was never a gearhead. Like I was kind of saying earlier, it's like, I was kind of just reading up on as much as I could and going through and reading podcast forums and what is everyone else using type stuff, and kind of getting a list from there. But I don't have a whole lot of crazy gear going on, because I don't necessarily need a whole lot of crazy gear, just because it's just me. So I've got a nice Blue Yeti microphone going straight into the laptop, and I kind of manipulate stuff from there. I've got some nice outboard gear for when I go out and do a couple of interviews, when I go talk to people in person, a couple SM58s and, going into a Focusrite, preamp, things like that. Nothing too crazy. It's not like it's, crazy mixing boards and a whole lot of radio gear, which is stuff that I saw, when I would go out to do, radio interviews back in Primer 55 and even other bands that I played with. You'd go do the local radio there. So, I've always been around it, and, just at the end of the day, when I'm listening back to stuff, I just, I want to hear it, make sure it sounds good, and that's a huge thing with me, too. And looking back on some of my early episodes, I kind of keep going back to them, but, there was a few I took down just because the audio wasn't there, and I didn't want anyone to get into the show, go back and check out one of those old episodes and be like, God, this show sounds like shit, and never want to listen to it again. So.
I'm with you there. I am totally with you there. So I think, and not to pat ourselves on the back, but I think the audio and the content that Chris and I offer to the listening public is probably the best out there, one of the best, if not the best. And that's just a tribute to how dedicated we are. And I like to hear from other guys who are doing the same thing and have that same dedication. So good for you.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And like I say, I listen to you guys all the time. You guys put together a great product. And the one thing I wanted to say to you, Neely, after I got off the phone with Chris the other day, I just sat back and I was like, now I understand how he can do a 6-hour radio show. You just give Chris a topic, man, and he'll just talk and talk and talk. You get him hyped up on what was that, Mountain Dew Black you said you were drinking?
Yeah, that I drank a Mountain Dew, I think it was Mountain Dew Black, and good Lord, I was going.
Well, also, the subjects that we cover on the show, 9 times out of 10, I'm pretty much in charge of laying out the ideas for the show. We don't script anything or have anything pre-planned. We just have maybe a list of topics we want to touch on, and it just goes from there, and it balloons out to 6 hours before you know it. And for some reason, people tune in and they go, God damn, I laughed my ass off when you guys talked about this or talked about that. And we're like, okay.
That's nice. Good stuff, man. Like I said, I love the way you guys do it too, where you do it live on Saturday nights and then break it up throughout the week. I think it's a great idea there. And I kind of wanted to get into some stuff with you guys. I was trying to think of the classic metal show, something that I could bring to the table, bring to your show. And I got this killer story about meeting when Fred Corey came to town. Do you guys want to hear that?
Yeah.
All right, man. So when I was 17 years old, I was in this local band out of Nashville, Tennessee, and that was around 1996. So that's when the hair metal of the Sunset Strip was all just beginning to, ascend on Nashville. Like everywhere you went, man, you would go to see a show and you'd look over and you'd be standing next to like the Nelson Twins. Like, why are the Nelson Twins here? That's so crazy. And then like a friend of mine worked at a car dealership and sold Bret Michaels a car, and then we were just starting to see these dudes pop up everywhere. So I had this band in high school, and there was a local music store in Hendersonville, Tennessee. It's a suburb of Nashville. It's where Johnny Cash lived. It's where Roy Orbison lived. Like, all their kids went to my high school type thing. And I went to this little local used record store, and the guy behind the counter I would talk to all the time, probably 10 years older than me, but he was a wealth of knowledge when it came to music. So I just, like I'd like to do, picked his brain all the time. Told him about my band and whatnot. And one day I go in, and he's like, man, Fred Corey from Cinderella was just in here, and he's in town recording bands. We're like, what? What's going on here? And so he put me in touch with Fred. Fred invited us down to his this lavish studio in the middle of nowhere. And Fred became a mentor from then on, man. And he invited us out to record all the time. He recorded some of my early band stuff, and like I would do with everybody, between bass takes, I would be like, Fred Corey, man, tell me about playing the Moscow Music Peace Festival, and come on, Fred, tell me about, did you really hang out with those girls from the B-Girl video or whatever, those B-Girls from their videos and stuff like that. I would just it was so crazy growing up in that time period. And then Fred Corey comes to your little local town and wants to record your band when you're in high school.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. And I know exactly what you're talking about, because I know a lot of the 80s guys relocated to Nashville. Mark Slaughter, I believe Vince Neil was there for a short time. You mentioned Bret Michaels, of course, Fred Corey. I think our good friend Ron Keel had moved there for a while. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It was like a everybody made an exodus out of L.A. and went to Nashville for some reason. But I understand that's a very rich recording town, and there's a lot of stuff happening. Or I don't know what the environment is there today, but I know back in the 90s that it seemed like everybody, as you mentioned, in the hair metal, hair band world was going to Nashville for some reason. And what is the environment like today as far as that's concerned?
I mean, Nashville as a whole has become like a huge it city, and every time you turn around, I mean, they've got the rock and roll residencies down there, where like Eric Brittingham will jump up and play all the time, and pretty much every touring band that comes through wants to jump up and play with those guys, and Mark Slaughter's down there. There was a time where we were rehearsing, the band that I was in at the time, and Cinderella had rented the room right next to us, and we were practicing. My band was practicing, and through the walls you kept hearing Slaughter songs. And you're like, why is Cinderella over there rehearsing the Slaughter songs? So, we're friends with those guys. We peek our head in, and it's like Mark Slaughter, a random guitar player, Fred Corey on drums, and they were just, getting a cover set together. And we're like, what's going on around here? It was such a crazy time for music.
Sure, man. Well, dude, let's swing it back to your podcast, because I do want to touch on it, especially so that our fans, because our fans are very loyal podcast listeners, and as you and I talked about, I am a big podcast listener, but I'm picky, like I think most people are these days. I think people people are sick and tired of what I'll just say the commercial radio vibe. You know, the standard interviews and the standard what's it like questions and this and that. And, you know, the podcasts that you listed are the same podcasts that I listen to as well. And the one thing that I think separates all of us from that is when we do interview bands, we stray as far away from where did you record, what's it like, and, you know, who's your biggest influence questions as we can. You know, for you, when you go into an interview, and I know you're like me and that you don't really have a plan when you do, how much does it make you cringe when you fuck up and ask those questions, you know, just because you're trying, if for no other reason than you're trying to get them talking?
It's honestly the worst, and I'll give you an example. I had David Ellefson of Megadeth on, and I'm a gigantic Megadeth fan, and he was obviously, I'm a bass player. He was one of my bass heroes growing up. I got to meet him as a kid, but it was very quick. And when I got the chance to talk to him, I had him on I think I got him for like, you know, the standard 25 minutes.
Sure.
And we were sitting there talking, and I just almost ran out of stuff to talk about, and I blurted out, you know, what was your bass, you know, what made you want to play bass? And as soon as those words came out of my mouth, I just wanted to punch myself in the face. I was like, I cannot believe I just asked him, you know, what made Dave Ellefson want to play bass, when I know I've heard that answer 9,000 times. It was I just wanted to choke myself out.
and I do the same thing, man. I mean, it doesn't happen a lot anymore, but I had it happen not too long ago where I literally asked a what's it like question. I forget who, I think it might have been to Zetro, who, what made it even worse is that Zet and I are friends, and I literally asked Zet, well, what's it like to be out on tour? And I was like, oh, what is wrong with you, you fucking idiot? You know, you just hate when you make those mistakes, man. But, you know, honestly, though, if you didn't care about that, and this is my assessment, if you didn't care about doing that, if you just let it go, then you would do a shitty podcast because you would accept that. And it's, in a way, it's kind of cool that you do get upset when you make what you think are mistakes to your own quality of show, because it's what makes you better than the bulk of everybody out there, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And another thing, too, is kind of what we're talking about, you know, with the guests that I have, you know, when you're talking about your friends with them, like I just had Etzel from Dope on a couple of weeks ago, and you know, the big primer tour we did back in '02 was we were opening for Dope. And, you know, I just kind of kept in touch with those guys through the years, and you know, Virus from Dope came on, like, episode 7, when they put up this latest live album / new album that they put out. You know, I wanted to have Etzel on, and we set it up, and, you know, when I first get on the phone with him, he's like, hey, man, how are your kids doing? I follow you on Instagram. You know, I see everything's going really well. And you don't ever think that Etzel from Dope is, like, worrying about how your kids are doing. It's always so crazy to see stuff like that.
Oh, it is, dude. It's, you know, I was telling you when we did the podcast about how Anselmo was asking me about my book. And, you know, he was like, you got to send me one. Here's the address. And here's, you know, it's Philip Anselmo. He's like sending me, he's throwing me his address. And he's, you know, hey, send me a book and, you know, catch up with me when I'm in town and we'll go and do blah, blah, blah. You know, and it is cool when you turn what we're doing, because all we're doing is just bullshit, and the same as we would really the same as we would do with our buddies at the bar. But now our buddies get to be, you know, rock stars, and it's kind of, you know, it's I don't know about you, and I don't know about you either, Neely, but for me, I still get excited, even guys that I'm very much friendly with. You know, and I've been doing this a long time. I know a lot of guys. I've known a lot of the bands, and I still get, you know, when my phone rings and it's, I don't know, Jason Newsted on the other side of the phone, and he's like, what's up, man? I still am like, fuck, how am I in this world, man? It's crazy.
Well, I got to be honest. I'm going to interject something here, and probably for me personally, one of my biggest epiphany moments as to where our voices are heard out there is that I attended NAMM last year for the first time, and I met several people out there that are in the biz, you know, producers, musicians, whatnot. And my good friend, our good friend, Bob Nalbandian, introduced me around a couple people. You know, I knew who they were, but I'd never met them before. And he introduced me, and he goes, "Oh, dude, I listen to your show all the time." It's like, what? It goes, and then I was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, of all places, this past end of September. I went up for the Dokken reunion show, and I was at a hotel bar of all places, and I was sitting there just having a drink with Mick Brown. And some guy comes up and he's talking to Mick, and Mick is a real cordial guy. And he's, "Oh, hey, let me introduce you to my good friend Neely from the Classic Metal Show." "Holy shit! I listen to your show all the time, dude. I got to get a picture with you." And it's like, what? Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It's like,
oh, wow.
You know, so it's that kind of stuff. And it's just like, okay, yeah, it's cool. I understand people listen, but I never think of it in that, you know, in that realm at all, ever. But just this past year, going to NAMM, and of course, you know, a few other incidences in a couple small town shows that I attended, and people, you know, came up and talked, and, "Hey, who are you and what do you do?" And I tell them, and it's, "Dude, I listened to your show that time when you and Chris," you know, and they relate something that we did like 5 years ago, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. It's like, wow, get a picture with you, and Chris can tell you the same story. He's over in, Pittsburgh, and you went to that Judas Priest Steel Panther show, and people were just like, "I got to get a picture with you, dude."
Yeah, people literally, I was standing behind, I was in I don't know if you've ever been to this place in Pittsburgh, dude, but it's where they have bigger shows, they have loges, but the loges are kind of on the floor, like they line what would be the floor. And they just have like a kind of like a fence type of a thing. And I was just standing there hanging out with my buddies at this show, you know, and believe me, the loge didn't come from me. It came from people that were way more connected than me. I just happened to be there. And I was just standing there, and this couple comes up to me and is like, "Dude, you're Chris from the Classic Metal Show, aren't you?" And I was like, I didn't even know how to answer. At first I wanted to say no, because I don't know. They might want to punch me or something, but
you might owe them $20 or something.
Yeah, exactly. But they were like, "Dude, we fucking love the show. Hail and kill, hand job," you know, and all this shit. And then they were like, "Dude, you got to take a picture with us." So I'm leaning over this fucking barrier, taking a picture with these guys, you know, and I've had that happen several times. You know, another story that I tell on the show, and then we'll swing it back to you. I know we're just rambling, but
what we do.
I was at Steel Panther here in Cleveland, and I came out of the show, and we were standing in like the lobby, and I had this girl come up to me, and she just walked up to me, and she looked me in the eye, and she goes, "Fuck you, pal." And then she just ran away. and what it was her boyfriend sent her over to do it, seeing if I was the guy. And she did. She just said, "Fuck you, pal," and then she ran away. And then I just kind of laughed. And then the guy came over and took a bunch of pictures and shit. So, you know, it's really kind of weird, you know, to have this shit happen. But, you know, I have to imagine for you, because you're still fairly young in the podcasting world, that shit comes. But I would imagine, and I'm going to guess, and you tell me I'm wrong, right now you're getting to the phase, because your podcast is taking off, where people are starting to be like reminding you of shit that you've said or talked about on the show, and you may not remember it. Are you getting to that point yet?
Oh, I'm absolutely getting to that point. And, you know, it's funny. People are starting to pick up on words that I tend to say a lot.
Oh, yeah.
You know, where you guys a lot, you guys say "sure" a lot and things like that, where
Right.
people are picking up on the little idiosyncrasies of my voice and things like that. And it's kind of funny. And another thing that a lot of people are starting to do are reaching out to me and asking me to sign things to send to them. And it's funny because, you know, in the last 10 years, I haven't toured. I did my last big, U.S. tour in like 07, 08, somewhere in there. So, I mean, I've pretty much laid low and been a dad and a husband, for the last 10 years. And then I got back into this business. and it's funny, you know, to lay low that long, and then people are wanting to start to get your autograph again because, you know, being in any band, you know, that people are coming up and you know, getting Primer 55 stuff autographed and things like that, and you know, people are randomly will send stuff every once in a while, but now people are wanting, like, you know, Talk to Me autographs, and it's a very odd world we live in.
It is, man, and it's fun, but and you know, because you were in a band, it might not be as odd to you. For me, it is always odd. I don't care how many downloads we do. I don't care how successful the show gets. When someone recognizes me and wants to talk to me about the stuff that I'm doing and wants me to sign something or take a picture or whatever, I'm always like, I'll always do it. And I will spend hours talking to people because, one, I never shut the fuck up. But two, I cannot fathom, you know, that people give a fuck what I've got to say. You know, it's crazy. And now with the books, it's even more crazy. You know, people are like, we have a listener in Finland. He bought the books from me, paid a crazy amount of money to have us ship them to Finland, but only if I would sign them and then mail them to Neely and have Neely sign them and then send them to Finland. I mean, it's so weird, you know, because we're all three of us on the phone right now. We're just three douchebags, you know.
We're the three assholes in the room.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
We're not famous, or at least I don't think we're famous, and it is so, to me, it's still bizarro world when people care, you know.
Exactly, and I just had my first Christmas gift from a listener that, you know, I didn't know previously. I didn't know from Primer. He came into the show because he liked some of the guests I had on, and you know, it's funny every time I put out a new T-shirt design, you know, put out some, you know, sell some stickers or some vinyl decals or anything. He's like the first one to buy it. Like no matter what I put out, I could, you know, say, hey, there's a Talk to Me mug out. Boom, he's right there. And he just sent me that new Vulgar Display of Pantera book, that picture book. Oh my God, that thing is great.
Wow, that's like not cheap either.
No, it's not at all. Like, you know, it's funny because he sent me a message. He's like, hey man, I got you something kind of small for Christmas. You know, do you mind sending, you know, can I have your address type stuff? And I was like, yeah, no problem. And then, you know, I'm thinking it's just going to be something really, really cheesy. And then I get home from work and bust open the box. And I'm like, oh my God, like that's, you know, I was going to ask Santa Claus for that, you know?
Nice, dude. Well, dude, with your podcast, man, I mean, you're getting good guests, but at this point, I'm going to assume, especially with the Blabbermouth helping you, you're starting to get into that publicist circle a little bit, where you get the bigger offers and whatnot, where you start getting the bigger bands. You know, who are you looking forward to that you have not gotten to yet?
I mean, you know, the pinnacle is going to be either, you know, Phil Anselmo or Rex Brown, you know, one of the Pantera guys, because that was, you know, my band growing up. I haven't got either one of those guys yet. You know, obviously Vinnie Paul too. You know, hung out with some of those guys recently, but it was under the leave your recorder at home circumstances.
Right.
I was like, all right, that's cool. You know, well, you know, Neely names drop Dawkins all the time, so I'm good friends with Chris Cale from Five Finger Death Punch. And, you know, he was in town here in Louisville, and Hell Yeah was here, and he was like, hey, do you want to go hang out with us? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, do you mind if I bring my recorder just in case? And he was like, man, I don't want to be the guy that brings the journalist. And I was like, oh, Jesus, I'm a journalist now. But, he didn't want to be the guy that brought the journalist with him, so he asked me to leave that at home. But, man, Vinny was telling so many great stories, and I was just like, if I would have just had the recorder, like, just sticking out of my pocket, it would have been podcast gold, because he was just holding court, telling great stories. But yeah, one of, you know, Pantera guys, obviously, you know, Metallica guys. But you know, I'm at that point where, you know, I just hit I guess episode 79. Just had my first Rock and Roll Hall of Famer with Glenn Hughes on the podcast. You know, but I've also just the one great thing about it being my show and my show only is I get to just, you know, if I want a guest, I'll go for it. And I've had random people such as you know, Glenn Benton of Deicide and Jeff Walker of Carcass, some of the death metal guys I liked as a little kid. And then, you know, my 1-year anniversary show was Max Cavalera. I've had Mark Rizzo on, and just reaching out to some of these people. And like you're saying, you know, I'm giving the publicist, you I'm in those loops now. And then the one nice thing about Blabbermouth and those sites is when I reach out to publicists now and say, hey, I'm Joshua Toomey from Talk Toomey. They go, oh yeah, we know your show. I'm like, wow, you know my show? That's really cool. So, when I do ask, say, hey, can I talk to Max Cavalera? They're like, yeah, no problem. And I'm getting right through to these people now. So it's pretty crazy. And, going back to coming in with Volbeats, that was actually one of my first Blabbermouth-ish stories, is because I had Joey Z from Life of Agony on, and Joey Z basically said that he thought that Volbeat may or may not be stealing Life of Agony's sound.
I remember that, yeah.
Well, Josh, I got to ask you, and Chris, I can confirm this. Our show is kind of in a weird place. Chris and I kind of like talk about this periodically, and you're having a lot of success interviewing various guests, musical guests, whatnot, and a big part of the stepping stones that the Classic Metal Show took over the last 20 years is the fact that we, too, kind of started off with a lot of great interviews. There was a point where we were doing like 3 interviews a week. And we realized, and I don't know if this is the case for you, and I would never discourage you. For some reason, our fans, and I can only talk about our fans, they're less interested in the interviews and more interested in what Chris and I have to say. Our interviews, for whatever reason, they get the lowest download numbers of all the segments that we do. And it's really weird. And we used to run the interviews, here on the show on Saturday during the show. And we decided to relegate that to a special segment on our affiliate, Uncontrolled Noise, to in the studio with the Classic Metal Show, and that seems to catch that niche audience. But for whatever reason, our fans are less interested in these rock star interviews, and that belongs to a real niche audience. Is that something that you found, since you've been doing your podcast?
I mean, the one thing that you guys have going for you is you have each other, to where my show is just me talking into a mic. So a lot of it kind of has to be based around having the guest on. And, I do kind of an opening monologue, quote unquote. Started doing a metal cover of the week, reading iTunes reviews, things like that, just kind of filling that opening monologue space. But I mean, my show has always kind of been more based on the interaction between me and the artist. And, I wish I had a co-host? Yes. A lot of times I would just love to.
I wish I had a co-host.
Hey!
No, man. You're in a great spot having Chris Aiken there to bounce off of.
I agree fully.
But yeah, I mean, the one great thing about having the interviews, I try not to do too many interviews at a time. I'll bank some up, for right around this time of the year. You got to bank a few up because a lot of people are off for Christmas and things like that. But a lot of the times too, I like to mix in another podcaster. I like to mix in a comedian. I've had Jim Brewer on. I've had Don Jameson on. Having those guys on that are natural talkers. I like to mix in a good metal musician. Every as much as I can too. And I try to get as many marquee names as possible. But what I'm trying to get to is, it being a show that's just once a week, comes out every Thursday, you can get one great episode a week or one great interview a week and not have to worry about 3 or 4, non-marquee band names or things like that. So a lot of people ask me how I get such big names on the show. But if you're targeting 10 big names and one comes through, every week, then you're gonna have a pretty good success rate, I think. So, that's where a lot of that comes from, is just determination, focusing on trying to get the bigger names and building relationships with publicists, and then also, calling in favors with past friends too.
Sure. All right, Josh. Well, since we've talked so much about your podcast, we never really discussed where people can hear it, how they can get it, what platforms are you on, so on and so forth. So why don't you let people know where to find the Talk to Me podcast?
You can find Talk to Me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Podcast Addict. pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts, you're going to find it. It's talktomepod.com is the site for, most of the stuff there. So, and it's Toomey, like Chris said earlier, Toomey, as in my last name. So, yeah, Talk to Me, it's out there, man, and just search around, you'll find it. And most likely, if you're reading Blabbermouth, you're finding Talk to Me content on there.
Sure, excellent. Well, Chris and I'm going to speak for Chris. We both wish you good luck. Chris and I are very thrilled when we hear other guys, gals having successes with their own podcast and do it well. Chris will tell you that we've inspired a lot of different people over our many years to go out there and pursue some kind of a broadcasting outlet, be it radio or podcast or internet radio shows. And it's always, to us, it's a real honor when people say, I'm starting a show because of you guys, or I'm starting a podcast because of you guys. And and I'm not saying that that's the credit that you're giving us, but my point is that we always encourage anybody who has that creative outlet and can do it well. We wish them nothing but the best of luck, and hope you guys have great success, and great success to you and your podcast in 2017.
Well, thank you guys so much, and thanks for having me on. And the one thing I think a lot of people, if they ever meet me and then want to start a podcast afterwards, it must be only because they're like, well, if this asshole can do a podcast, then I can definitely do a podcast. So that's where I see that.
Well, we all know that's not the truth, because we know so many people who attempted to do a podcast and they never lasted even through their second edition, because it's just like, wait a minute, there's a lot of work that goes into this.
And there is a lot of work, and I have a family, I have kids, I have a job. So, there are a lot of, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning nights trying to get this show put together. But, you build that unwritten contract with your listeners that every Thursday there's going to be a new Talk to Me episode out there. And, there's been a lot of Wednesday nights to where I'm up up until 4 and then get back up at 6 for work. So, but I'm going to definitely put it out each and every week, and hopefully everybody continues to enjoy it.
Oh, good. Well, consistency is the key, because Chris and I were sticklers about that, and we still are, that you get new content every week. So good for you, Josh. So, continued success, and, love to see a new guy come on the scene and, make a little noise out there and possibly be a competitor to us, which will never happen. But anyway.
We're never competitors. There's enough airtime to go around for everybody.
Sure, absolutely. All right, Josh. Well, we appreciate you taking a few minutes to talk to us here on the Classic Metal Show. As I said, good success with your podcast. And what do you got coming up that people might be interested in hearing?
Next week will be Eric Rogers, former vocalist of Stereo Mud. They were, a great band in the early 2000s, and with Joey Z and Corey Lowry and stuff. So yeah, Eric and I sat down for a pretty good hour or so. I had toured in a band that he was in another band kind of deal, and just one of those kept in touch and called in a favor. So yeah, Eric Rogers and Stereo Mud, breaking down that band and all that great stuff. And last couple episodes, Chris Aiken was on. Glenn Hughes just on, so it's been a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys all check it out. And we'll say all of your listeners that have been listening so far, I'm already blowing up. My Facebook is blowing up over here. I'm getting all kinds of direct messages from your listeners, so it's been a lot of fun.
That's cool. All right, Josh. Well, I want to close out with something here. Are you a fan of Warrior Soul?
Can't say that I am.
Really? All right. Well, I'm going to introduce you to Warrior Soul then. But this is a favorite band of both Chris and mine, and I think this kind of sums up our love for podcasting, and it's a cool tune. So check it out. So we want to thank Josh Toomey for being part of the Classic Metal Show. Go check out his podcast, Talk to Me, and become a fan and subscribe. So. I'm going to leave you with some Warrior Soul with some Love Destruction. How about that,
nice.
Josh?
I like it.
All right. Well, thanks for being a part of the Classic Metal Show tonight, Josh. So here it is. This is Warrior Soul with Love Destruction exclusively here
on your Classic Metal Show.